As time goes by, Plants vs Zombies keeps getting more and more plants, each more complex than the last, and even making older plants obsolete. With this model in mind, can you beat Plants vs Zombies 2 with only pea shooters? For this challenge, we'll be playing on the gardenless version of the game, which is basically a PC port of PvZ 2 with tons of quality of life changes. And before you get to it, here are some ground rules we'll have to follow. We are only allowed to use pea shooters, and as to make this challenge more interesting, we'll also be using gold blooms so that most levels aren't just straight up impossible. We have all trophies enabled except for sun refunds. We'll be skipping any levels that do not allow you to choose your plants. We'll be trying to beat the levels on very hard difficulty by default, though this will vary as you'll see. And finally, pea shooters performance will be ranked with a star system I'll be explaining later on. So, without further ado, let's get into it. Ancient Egypt is a fairly simple world with barely any noteworthy mechanics. The only thing to keep in mind is that it likes to spawn tombstones all over the place, which are basically just a walnut for the zombies and nothing else. First level in our adventure goes down without any problem at all, as cone heads are not enough to realistically be a problem, especially when they take their sweet time to spawn. And Ras are literally just brown coats, but worse, which is hilarious. So, let's talk about strategy and the 50% rule. To understand how the 50% rule works and what it is, you must imagine the following. Zombies spawn by waves that are predetermined by the devs, who draw sort of a timeline with each wave and what it'll spawn. And on Gardenless, there is very little randomness when it comes to what zombies the game decides to spawn. Each wave has a total health that the game keeps track of, because when the total health of that wave goes below 50%, the game spawns the next wave in the timeline. This is the first way in which the game decides to spawn waves. The second being if 30 seconds have passed since the last wave was spawned, as a failsafe against infinite stalling, if you will. This is abusable, because it means that if we can wait for 30 seconds to pass before each wave every single time, it'll give us more time to collect sun from the sky and for gold bloom to recharge, giving us a better and stronger defense for the waves to come. And this is basically what our early game strategy consists of, stalling as much as possible to better deal with what the level has in store. Before we talk about day 2, here's how the basic zombies pair against our pea shooters. In order to kill brown coats, cone heads, and bucket heads by themselves, we'll need 1, 2, and 3 pea shooters respectively. Additionally, a brown coat is so weak it can be killed if a pea shooter is planted just 3 tiles in front of it, which is extremely valuable information for stalling for those sweet 30-second waves. As a bonus, a lonely pea shooter can solo a conehead if left uninterrupted. Lastly, in a pinch, you can use a plant food on a pea shooter to almost kill a buckethead by itself. Day 2 comes by and introduces us to our first buckethead. These zombies will later on turn out to be an absolute pain in my ass, but as of right now, stalling gives us an economy that can easily afford enough pea shooters to get through them. I even used 3 pea shooters to kill the first buckethead instead of using the plant food as the game intended, just in case we needed it, but turns out, really didn't. These past 2 levels have accumulated a total of 10 stars, but what does that mean? We'll be scoring pea shooters' performance on a star system, where they gain more stars the better they perform. Gardenless has a difficulty system ranging from easy to very hard, so winning a level on very hard would give us 4 stars, while winning on easy would give us only 1. 5 stars are given to levels that are beatable on very hard without the help of any lawnmowers, and of course, if a level is impossible even on easy, it'll give us 0 stars. So as of now, here's what our star map looks like. Raw zombies basically act like brown coats, having the same HP and speed as them. But get this, it gets funnier, because these bottom of the box dry crumbs of cookie manage to be worse than brown coats somehow. This is because when they try to suck up the little sun, don't ask, they stop for a little bit, which you can abuse by simply leaving your cursor next to them to catch the sun while it's being sucked by these pesky little mosquitoes. By the way, in case you're asking, the whole Smash intro was a one-time thing, because it kinda fucks up the pace of the video, so I decided to present you these little almanac entry cards you're seeing at the bottom right of the screen. There, you can see how many pea shooters are needed to kill the shown zombie before receiving significant loss, how difficult they are to deal with, and a brief description of the zombie. In any case, remember what I talked about for the early game strategy? Well, we're gonna have to modify this to deal with ancient Egypt's mechanic of spawning tombstones. Since these act as a shield for zombies that we will need to get through if we wish to have as much time to kill a zombie as possible, we'll forget about the don't plant any pea shooters until necessary type of deal, and just plant pea shooters on rows with tombstones in order to destroy them as soon as possible. This may lead to waves coming faster, yes, but keep fucking armored titans on our lawn for long enough will cause our death sooner or later. By the way, the game is starting to get very aggressive with hordes of bucketheads coming for us and even a double buckethead spawning in the final wave. Thankfully, we had enough sun to plant 4 columns of pea shooters, which deals with basically anything except for double bucketheads, who were defeated by using the plant food we accumulated. Testing for camels is a little hard, as they vary on how many of them they spawn, but for reference, each camel zombie can take up to 22 peas, so a little less than a conehead, though it should be noted that they are slower than one, so it balances out. Camels greatly incentivize using plants that have a way to pierce through zombies, but of course, we're stuck with Mr. Shitter here, so nothing like brute force to deal with our problems. You might notice that I sometimes withhold planting any pea shooters during a level, even though I clearly have the sum to. This is because the game likes to pull a sneaky attack on us on some levels, spawning things like a buckethead and a conehead clamped together out of nowhere. In these scenarios, it's best to make sure that we have all the sun necessary to deal with it, instead of having to panic and fumble our way through it or even using a lawnmower or plant food. Precaution is our best friend, and although I could just restart the level after gaining the knowledge that the sneaky attack exists, let me tell you, this shit already takes long enough to record, script, pacing, also montage, and feeling of the video, Photoshop. Explorers can be very dangerous as they easily kill anything that comes in contact with them, and they have above average speed. And soon as a troublesome zombie gets introduced, the game wastes no time in using them efficiently, spawning explorers behind bulkier zombies like camels to protect them, essentially giving them free mileage to get it to our pea shooters sooner. Nothing we can deal with for the moment, but we must watch out for these sneaky explorers for the future, as they might just cause our gloom and doom. As tomb raiders get introduced, I figured now was a better time than ever to also talk about tombstones. They don't do much, just standing there, menacingly, and soaking up to 32 peas, which translates to a long ass time. And of course, a zombie that can just spawn a bunch of these willy-nilly is going to be an absolute menace. That's why they're our utmost priority, preferably being killed before any tombstones can spawn, as they have a tendency to interrupt your already firing pea shooters, which can run out of control. As they take 19 peas to kill, it's best to use 3 pea shooters to mitigate their influence on our lawn as much as possible, because although they still manage to spawn 1 tombstone from time to time, having 4 pea shooters just for a tomb raider is asking a little too much for most situations. Anyway, day 10 shows us exactly what I meant by being cautious, as the game spawns a buckethead in a lane where I only had 1 pea shooter and was still getting my way through a tombstone. We had to plant a lot of pea shooters just to solve that problem, but then another buckethead spawns in a lane with a lonely pea shooter yet again. We were able to manage this dangerous situation with ease thanks to the precautions we take navigating these levels, but otherwise this would have absolutely meant the usage of a lawnmower at the very least. You might also notice that I aggressively planted a 4th pea shooter to enter this tomb raiser, which spared us from having to deal with an additional tombstone, so even though it created an imbalance in our comp, with our second row only having 2 pea shooters, I'd say it was worth it, especially given that our gold bloom was almost ready to give life to us. And given that this was our first double flag level, we were able to plant up to 6 rows full of pea shooters, and I gotta say, I do love my ticket to the satisfactory factory seeing these peas shred through anything that gets in our way. Day 11 is a locked and loaded level, and although pea shooter is available, we'll skip this level since we're competing with other plants in this series, and it would be unfair to give an extra level to just the pea shooter. Pharaohs tend to be more scary looking than actually dangerous, because although they have a massive booty that takes 75 goddamn peas to take down, When you think about it, it's just 10 more than a Buckethead. And their special ability of having this psycho mode when they get down to low HP is basically irrelevant, as their internet connection likes to do them a little trolling. You can use a plant food to get rid of a pharaoh, but be careful, because that hungry onga bonga will catch up to you if unprepared. I just noticed how the game loves to spam Raz at us. It's kinda funny, honestly, like how the game treats them as this kind of scary zombie, like, ooh, Raz, you're gonna eat your ass, when in reality they just get demolished so hard. By the way, pharaohs were no problem, as the game only spawned a handful of them in this level, and I know Gold Bloom looks like it's making this trivial, but believe me, things get really brutal on later worlds, and even on later levels. Trust me, I tried this game with only pea shooters and no gold blooms, and shit gets bad later on. I had to scrap getting pounded by the game. You might look at this and think to yourself, why would the game put mold colonies on the back two columns, and how badly does that affect us? Well, pretty badly actually. Think about it this way. Making us plant pea shooters 2 columns further to the right is as if zombies spawned in the 7th column instead of the 9th, giving us much less time and space to deal with the threats. Of course, since the game is still going easy on us, this was of no issue, but later on, this is the kind of thing that will be absolutely lethal, and unfortunately, we just have to deal with it. For now though, we keep the 5-star streak going. This level spawns Tomb Raiders like its life depends on it. It's so aggressive in fact that we need to keep up our aggression and use all of our sun as soon as possible to deal with them before they create a butterfly effect and fill the whole lawn with walls. And as you can see, as soon as we fail to manage the Tomb Raiders before they spawn gravestones, shit gets out of hand quick. The one counterplay we have against Tomb Raiders is how they can spawn a grave in an already occupied tile. So we tried our best to keep our columns full as much as we could, and although things got messy, we barely managed to beat the level on very hard, though we had to use a lawnmower. A little reminder, by the way, that this is day 14 of ancient Egypt, and we already were threatened enough to have to use lawnmowers. If you thought this challenge was going to be a no-brainer just because we have gold blooms, you ain't ready for what's coming. Day 15 gives us some good news, bad news type of deal. Bad news, it's an endangered plants level, and the endangered plants are way in the 5th column. Good news, they're sunflowers, so our pea shooters spam will be much greater. As such, we were able to deal with the hordes of bucketheads and pharaohs just barely, and funnily enough, the most threatened row during the final wave ended up not being one with the endangered sunflowers in it. Day 17 introduces us to what may very well become a problem later on, that being levels that restrict how many pea shooters you have access to. Since pea shooters have no real strength overall, and they struggle with groups and bulky zombies alike, they only manage to get through by their sheer number. Remove the big number and all that's left is some piss shooters. With that said, 14 is an awkward number, since it's not enough to make 3 full columns of pea shooters, meaning we had to juggle a little bit with where we put our plants. This level was more of an introduction to the whole concept, so it was pretty easy, but be wary, it won't always be the case. Ah yes, our first plan your defense level. I must admit, these levels were the main inspiration behind this series, and of course the same type of series that other fellow content creators have done. Overall, this level is very interesting because of these 2 awkward gravestone spots that force us to use a plant food if we wish to keep all 4 of our pea shooters breathing. Do pea shooters even breathe? Like they photosynthesize, I guess. Keep the 4 of our pea shooters photosynthesizing. Our defenses hold pretty well up until the final wave, where they get overwhelmed on all fronts, relying on every single lawnmower to clear the mess. Remember the mold colonies and the plant restricting level? How about we combine them both and throw bucketheads in for maximum CVT, which stands for colonies, bucketheads, and torches, by the way, for real, don't look it up. Overall, the idea of juggling with our plants is taken even further here, as we had to treat our 11th and 12th pea shooter as if we had the 3rd column that switches depending on our needs. And at some point, I even had to dig through one of our columns to better focus on higher threats. This strategy managed pretty well until the final wave, where there was a buckethead in every single row and more to show, so no, we couldn't get this done without lawnmowers. Once again, we are back to protecting sunflowers from their inevitable doom. Except we actually managed to make that doom MF inevitable. It was very close, especially during the final wave where explorers were protected by bucket heads and camels got in line for their sunful meal. With smart usage of our plant food and putting pea shooters down as meat shields until everybody died, we managed to get through this with the sunflowers missing only a couple of petals. Here goes the first sub-level, which is basically a level that is attached to another different one and serves as either an extension on the idea of the previous level, but mostly as an introduction to an epic quest which doesn't concern our challenge. And of course, the game would not let this go without one third and last rodeo. This time around, our sun generation was so plentiful we could spam pea shooters off cooldown from the get-go. The problem though is how this level is designed. Since sunflowers are so far to the right, especially the middle one, we need to be very aggressive with our pea shooter planning and zombie killing, especially since tomb raisers exist, who will absolutely ruin your day if left alive for too long. But in being aggressive with how we kill zombies, we are actively triggering the 50% rule much quicker than what would be ideal, making more zombies spawn in rows where we already were in danger, making the danger that much worse, forcing us to be that much more aggressive, and the cycle goes on until we end up losing a sunflower due to many bulky zombies and or grouped zombies. And unfortunately, there is nothing we can do to solve this problem, it's simply how the level goes. This does force us to lower the difficulty a bit for the first time. Here's hoping the game will be more merciful in spawning problematic zombies. So, taking it down to hard, the game gives us just a little more time to breathe before chaos ensues, which was exactly what we needed to make this level close, but possible, thus concluding our first hard victory on 3 stars. Well, this looks familiar. Despite now being allowed to have a full 3 columns of pea shooters, it does not mean that this level is any easier. The game throws bulky zombies at us now more than ever in a level where we have limited pea shooters and limited space. In this level, you will be overwhelmed at some point, so you will have to decide which lane can be dealt by pea shooters alone and which lane will need a plant food, because you will not be able to save all of them. The key to winning here is to sparingly place pea shooters only when truly needed. When you have so little pea shooters to use, you have to focus your firepower on some lanes while abandoning others. Especially if you have to shovel a pea shooter every single time you need to place an extra firepower somewhere else, as doing this will quickly eat through your sunbank and leave you to dry. So, with good micromanagement and decision making, we were able to survive until the final wave and let lawnmowers do the rest, giving us a win on hard. Yeah, I forgot to scale up the difficulty for this level, but turns out I was right in forgetting so, because this level was already barely winnable on hard. Thanks to us only playing pea shooters, the number that the game gives us for our last defense makes us unable to fully utilize all of our sun, having spread out firepower. What this means is that it's best to create as many columns as possible, and leave the rest of the sun to be used during the level as we see fit in order to solve some problems like a double bucket head or double pharaohs. Anyhow, this one is almost possible on very hard, but every time we get to the final wave and use all our lawnmowers to clear the rest of the zombies, some goober decides to spawn in an empty lane to invalidate the run. And I mean every single time. It's still too close for comfort in hard, but it does the job just fine. This level just decided to be pea shooter's worst nightmare yet. Emphasis on yet. What am I even supposed to do against all of this? The zombies decided to whip out a Neruin's plan with this shit. It just counters me so fucking perfectly. Even on easy difficulty, we get overwhelmed extremely quickly. At first, I thought I should save up plant food for the tomb raisers, but then I got overwhelmed. Then I decided to use all plant foods to help the most handicapped rows. But then I got overwhelmed. But then I got perfect luck with the only tombstones from tomb raisers spawning in the same 2 rows so that I could kill them off with lawnmowers, and yet we still got overwhelmed. This is looking like a T-mod level to these poor old pea shooters. And unfortunately, Zomboss never lets us choose our plants, so his arrival marks an end to the ancient Egypt. Now, I know there are 10 more extra levels past Zomboss on every single world, but I'll be choosing to skip them for this series, simply because these are levels that push the difficulty to the extremes, which realistically no plant can single-handedly handle. That was a sentence. Which also makes for very still commentary. Anyway, trust me on this one, it's really boring even with Gold Bloom. So with that, let's talk about stats before we end the video. As we can see, Peashooter did pretty well all things considered, with its curve staying at the top throughout most of the world. It earned a total of 76 stars, which is 84.4% of all stars available, for an average of 4.22 stars per level, which is pretty damn high. All these stats put the Peashooter at S tier for Ancient Egypt. And of course, being the first and the easiest world in this game, it's not all that surprising really, but rest assured, it is not a trend for the rest of the worlds. This leads us to the end of the video. I'm not too sure that I'll be continuing this series, as I have a lot going on in my life at the moment. Though, of course, if you wish to motivate me and see more, like and subscribe. It really does go a long way. I hope to see all of you beautiful people very soon. Take care.